Dr. Shepard. This is the Converging Perspectives podcast. Converging perspectives is a concept that I've been working with since I was a teenager. It is the idea that through deep listening of another person, one can actually expand their perspective. Through stepping into somebody else's worldview, you can pick up so much more than just the data they're trying to send at you. That in the context of their beliefs, opinions, thoughts, perspectives, you can grok essentially a whole paradigm. And then when you step back into your own paradigm, you can integrate some of those ideas that you really stuck out to you into your own, which expands your own puzzle of reality, growing it, expanding it, such that your perspective may now overlap much more of that person's perspective than it previously did. Or at the very least, you're building out a three-dimensional puzzle of reality in which their perspective is another piece that gives you more. And so it's not about arguing. It's not about debate, canceling out someone else's ideas or opinions. It's about using someone else's mind to have a greater perspective on everything, to expand or extend your own mind. We will focus on many different topics, but we're going to start with politics because America is very polarized today. And it is my contention that the polarization we are facing in America is largely an illusion. It is false. It is essentially fabricated by rhetorical propaganda and just money-driven systems of the politic, which are more effective with negative news media than they are with honest articulation of the facts. If you bend the facts into a fear narrative, then people will be more sort of prodded to action, whether to protest or to send you money. And so essentially the system has cannibalized its own people, turning us into warring tribal factions when that is just not what we are. The reality is that we are probably closer on our values than ever before in American history. And that's really saying something when you look at how diverse America is, how we're a melting pot for all the countries of the world. And that we have somewhat successfully integrated a lot of these different people and their perspectives into the country. Yes, we deal with a little more conflict because of that, but we also have gained a lot because of that diversity of viewpoints being threaded together. This work that we're doing, this important experiment that we call America, is not over. I don't think it ends with an ethnic cleansing or an eradication of new viewpoints. I think, if anything, the future is the expansion of this system, but in a more intelligent way, because it has gotten sluggish. It has gotten broken to some degree. And I think a lot of us feel that. And a lot of my friends feel this emotion of labored exhaustion, disgust, just like, oh, can't we just burn it down and start over again? And that is why I think that we've elected Donald Trump, who is a warrior, who, many of whom's followers really just want him to break the system in order to start over again. And when you say that literally, you might start to recognize that, oh, well, I don't know if we want to completely break the system, because if we completely break the system, it may mean that many of us die, starve, are displaced from any kind of share of the economic pie. And so, people back off from that anarchist viewpoint and go, well, I don't mean that. I don't mean to go that far. But essentially, that's the energy that we're feeling today on both sides of the aisle. It's the same energy. And that's what's so interesting, is that people are feeling the same feelings, but choosing to be in exactly the opposite camps because they somehow interpret, oh, well, this guy is for me, and that person's not. What's important here is that we break all of this down and stop just reacting to the rhetoric that is driving the conversation and start actually digging beneath the conversation to what is really going on. What are our values really? Are they evolving? Are they changing? Why aren't we talking about those things? Why are we just hardening into these camps of no, abortion's evil, no, abortion's the freedom we need, like why don't we get into the intricacies of what a policy that's effective and pleases all people would actually be? Why do we need to hammer each other over the head with our morally righteous viewpoints? Well, there's a lot of psychology that I want to explore that will explain why this is, why we're doing this. And to me, it's actually not just, okay, that's why we're so screwed up as a country. It's by understanding our psychology, we can begin to unravel the knots we have tied ourselves in. So, first of all, let me talk about things that we're polarized on currently. I have friends who are pro Israel who will not watch any news that is critical of Israel. And I have friends who are pretty much in exactly the opposite place, that all the news they consume is anti Israel and pro Palestine and how much damage is being done. I, it behooves us to understand that the brain is not initially built for thinking. And that may surprise you because we're all trained from a young age to use it to think. But ultimately, what we're dealing with here is a brain that chooses to believe things in order to bond with other people as tribal mates. That's the primary point of belief for us. We're not really that great at cognitive analysis of things. Most of us haven't been trained to do it well, and when you are trained to do it well, you do it usually in connection with other people who keep you honest with your biases, because we are all very biased. That's the biases are really survival mechanisms for human beings to operate automatically without thinking. That's how we've evolved. My research on cognitive biases will be forthcoming in the online course that I've developed called Mind University. But essentially, if you synthesize the biases, you start to understand what these underlying motivations operating in all human beings all the time really are. And we're designed not to think most of the time. And so when we are primed by these political rhetoric, we're being primed to think automatically, to just jump into, oh, these people are evil. Oh, these people are good. And then start fighting. And this is not effective for democracy. This is counterproductive, but you get the best bang for your buck. And so businesses and politicians just keep doing it to our detriment. And it's to our detriment in more ways than one because it literally damages our brains. We're basically getting dopamine hits every time we get people to agree with us and make us feel like, oh, good, I have less cognitive dissonance now because clearly all the smart people agree with me. And that results in us being addicted to that button. Keep giving me the drug. And eventually that drug sort of wears out because that's what happens to dopamine. Um, and so we need even more of it. We need to get a higher dose. And so we get more extreme about the news that we follow because we keep needing to get this confirmation bias that that dispels all of our stress or anxiety, even while that stress and anxiety keeps building underneath the surface, because the problems that we have aren't getting solved because we're not able to communicate in order to solve them. And if you're saying to me, oh, it's a republic, Andrew, Republics work with representative government. Those people are supposed to solve the problem. Like, yeah, but those people are elected by us, and our polarization is something they're paying attention to and they're reflecting. We vote people in who will not talk to each other, who will only fight with each other, because that's the mentality we're operating at. And don't, I need not repeat the quote that many have said, and Einstein was one of them, that we cannot solve the problems at the same level of thinking that created them. We have to rise to a higher level of thinking. And that is done through consciousness, not through reactivity. So I have other friends who are polarized on the Ukraine war. Like, oh, we shouldn't be involved in that. And others like, oh my God, there's nothing we should support except Ukraine. I mean, this is the most obvious thing that the U.S. should be doing to fight evil Putin and his evil imperialist regime. It's like, okay, these are viewpoints. But let's talk about it. Let's talk about how that's going to work rather than just fighting about it. What are the values that we're actually cherishing and fighting for? Is that investment going to be worthwhile? Should we be involved in foreign wars at all? Or if we're not, does it cost us more than we realize? I have people who are still believing, millions of Americans actually still believe that the 2020 election was rigged. And I now have many liberal friends coming to me saying that the 2024 election was rigged. And they're presenting the same kind of gobbledygook statistical analysis by math people, very similar to Pito Navarro of the Trump administration in 2020, who put out his BS reports that never actually proved anything, just suggested and hinted that it's possible that these elections could have been rigged, but never proved anything, and it admitted as much in the actual documents. The the thing is, people don't need facts anymore. We're in a post-factual political era. People just need an argument, and then they can jump on it and agree with it and feel that dopamine hit. And that is a real problem for democracy. It's a real problem for me too. I just hate seeing people disagree and for there to be nowhere to go on that disagreement, nowhere to advance the conversation. To me, that's not a conversation. Debate is the opposite of real conversation, where you're trying to learn from another person. We are creating these silos, and technology is a huge part of it. Social media obviously is helping us find our way into these little troughs of information that we stay in, and we don't actually communicate with each other. And it is destructive. Jonathan Haidt did some research into human values and published it in his book, The Righteous Mind: How Good People Disagree on Religion and Politics. And it showed that people all have values of compassion, fairness, liberty, authority, loyalty, and purity. And that purity is sort of a wild card that we culturally informed, we sort of put it on different value sets. And we agree. It's a great point of disagreement, actually, where we place our purity. But essentially, all human beings have these values in common. And a lot of research has also been done to suggest that these values like fairness and freedom and family are core values of the American people and have been for decades and still are. The General Social Survey reported that 80% of Americans valued family in 1972, and in 2010s, it's still about 75 to 80%. 90% of people think that freedom is essential. 70% agree on the fairness in opportunity from pre-research in 2018. False news, however, spreads faster, 6 times as fast as truth, according to MIT. Polarized posts get 67% more engagement. 44% of Americans pick news that matches their viewpoints, which that was Reuters in 2021, which seems a little low to me because I see more than that. But that gives us hope too, right? That people are looking for things that might challenge them still. And 95% of Twitter interactions stay in group. So essentially, people don't want to argue now with the people on the other side. They try to stay in their little echo chambers. And so this data suggests that we're slipping, but only in the way we're doing democracy, not in the actual core values that we hold. And so if we start with talking about core values, my theory is that we will actually find ourselves in great agreement building a bridge or a network of what's possible for us, of what we really believe in, what we value, rather than breaking apart further. The problem often hits when we are talking to somebody with different viewpoints and then they start to just roll out these dramatic conspiracy theories, ideas that just cannot possibly be true from your perspective. The election fraud claims, which have been disproven through the courts, there's no strong evidence actually backing them up. Lots of different theories that were debunked, but it seemed to me that as soon as one theory was debunked, people moved on to another theory that could have proved it. You know, it wasn't the evidence wasn't convincing to anybody. It was the story that was convincing. That they wanted to believe the only way Trump could have lost is if somebody cheated. And I remember the argument being shared with me from a friend saying, like, Biden beat Trump. How is Biden more exciting than Trump? And the truth is, he wasn't. He was just not as scary as Trump to a lot of people. But in any case, it it it's again, it's about feelings. It's not about rational mathematical statistical data that was so convincing to me. It's not. It's about what we want to believe. And this is the basis of of cognitive bias and what is called motivated reasoning. All cognitive biases are motivated reasoning. And essentially, all of our brains do it all the time. We may have ways that we've learned to manage it, to minimize that, to push against our automatic thinking, but it's working on us all the time. So it's never going to be not there. What I need to say about conspiracy theorists is that they are not crazy. These are people who operate functionally in the world all the time. I think some statistics suggested that 1% of the world still believes the earth is flat, even though we have ample evidence to prove it to your eyeballs that that's not true. It's still 1% of the world believes that. But when you really start looking into conspiracism, you see that 44% of people believe this, 60% believe this, you know, at least one conspiracy like that can't be proven or that's been deep disproven. They just haven't looked at it closely enough to go, "Oh, I guess maybe that's not true." What's interesting about conspiracism is that it is true from time to time. And how exciting a narrative it is when it is true. Because if, my God, if 9/11 was an inside job, oh my God, heads would roll. People would be convicted or killed for treason. I mean, it's it's extremely exciting. It's the most exciting narrative you can imagine. All the Bond movies, all the you know, all these all the greatest movies are based on these big conspiracies. And so, they're exciting. They're much more attractive to us than the boring realities that we often have to accept from mainstream media. So, of course, we're more drawn to a podcaster who's telling us these dramatic stories of conspiracy and mayhem and diabolical cover ups. It's exciting. But what I want to say is that the reason we have conspiracy theories as human beings is not because we're losing our minds and they're crazy. It's probably, a huge factor in it is, of course, just distrust. It's a distrust addiction. People are afraid to trust powers that be, whether they're the government or some other mystery powers behind the government or just this organization or whatnot. We're drawn to this, but it's not necessarily just unhealthy. Beliefs are built around the, the desire to form tribes through shared beliefs in order to feel safe, just like the old religions always did. Conspiracy theorists are essentially forming another form of religion or cult, which is natural. I'm not saying it's good or bad, it's natural. We're projecting our values upon these stories, values of justice and betrayal and suffering, these larger truths that have happened to us or that seem to be the collective truth. We're projecting them on the stories that we tell. And we've been doing this for millennia through the myths that we have put into religions, which help us to metabolize these feelings of suffering and intensity that in order to code it for our descendants so that they will not forget what happened to us. And so there's a reason for this. And it's not evil. It's not just stupid. Um, it's human. And I think the sooner we embrace that, the better, so that we can begin to listen differently to our conspiracy theorist friends, not listening for the facts, which aren't there, but listen for the values, which are. Now, this explains very easily why the distrust in mainstream journalism has gotten so intense. Um, Most people see bias in journalism. I think it's 60%, according to Gallup poll in 2020. Um, so, so you see that journalist is biased, that he's clearly liberal. So, oh, I'm not going to watch him anymore. But here's the cost of trading mainstream journalism for a podcaster. Journalists, yes, they may be liberal. They may be liberal because they're going to journalism schools, which are by and large liberal, because the values of people who want to be going into journalism are often this liberal value of speaking truth to power, of fighting against rich and politically powerful people who seem to be oppressing individuals. So there is a consistency value-wise for most journalists, people interested in journalism, to be liberal. Um, Obviously, there's been a shift in the working class rate lately, kind of going toward the conservative. So you start to go, well, maybe that's changing. But that aside, journalists are perceived as left-leaning, on average. Fox News is the exception, of course, and Newsmax and OAN and several others. But here's what you lose when you trade out mainstream journalism for podcasters and bloggers. You trade out the training that they've done, the sophisticated training in good research, and you trade out the checks and balances that a journalistic organization puts on that journalist to make sure that they can't just hammer through their opinion piece and get it to be accepted by the mainstream. They create checks and balances so that and double checking of facts to make sure that they get it right so that they don't have to publish an apology the next week and say, oh, we got that wrong. We're very sorry. That is not up to the standards that we profess. That trust in journalism has been built over over decades and decades. And to just say, oh, they botched that one, I'm never going to trust them again. That's just, you're not trading up when you go to a non-journalistic source. You're just not. You got to look at the whole picture. And so for me, I still would lean towards mainstream media, noting the bias that I see in the journalists that are reporting it and trying to sort of offset that in my own mind and go, okay, the facts that they've presented are probably roughly accurate, but the way they're presenting it might be a little twisted towards their perspective. The way they're storying this, I may need to ask some critical questions like, well, how maybe that's a misrepresentation of those facts. And that, I think, is a more appropriate approach. Obviously, there are great podcasts out there, hopefully mine will be one of them, in which people are actually digging into this meat of the story and debating it. But if you have a podcaster that's just hammering home narratives so that you just sort of accept them, that's not healthy for your brain. That's not healthy for America. It's irresponsible in my mind. It's irresponsible because it drives us into these silos, these echo chambers that create that already basically burn down the bridge between our communication with each other. And that is not healthy for America. And why are we doing this? Why do we continue to get deeper into our biases? Obviously, the dopamine I already mentioned, but I think it's a bigger issue. It has a lot to do with instability of identity. It's at the individual level and at the collective level. We don't know who we are anymore. And this is intrinsically linked to narcissism. Now, narcissism, contrary to a lot of public opinion, is not too much self love. It's actually the opposite. It's self hatred or a lack of sense of self, leading to a reactive mechanism, natural reactive mechanism, of covering for that insecurity with a false projected sense of self that is super confident, super perfect, that you need to constantly work at supporting because it's not real and you know it. And I feel like not only has this become an epidemic in America, narcissism is shot off the charts in most psychological surveys, but it's a collective problem too. That identity, America is losing its sense of identity, and that loss of identity is costly. Yes, liberals have really pushed a narrative that's very shameful of American history. And you know what? It's factual. So we should not deny that and try to push Howard Zinn's A History of the United States out of schools. We should go, oh my gosh, this is true. And we should be able to go, wow, as shameful and dark as that period is for us, and still today, there's still dark things going on. I'm still proud to be an American. I'm still proud to be part of this experiment. And I can accept all this darkness over here and still go, there's a lot worth saving. This conversation about what America is gets straight to the point of our values. What are our values as Americans? What are we really fighting for here? Because if there's nothing to it, if there's no values here, we're just the latest empire in a series of empires, then what's there to save? But if America holds powerful values that we feel deeply connected to, not just our in-group tribalism, but like, oh my gosh, America believes in fairness. It believes in people having opportunity because not only is that a nice thing to do, but it's also brings more value to the collective when people are free to rise in society to levels where their unique talents can be delivered for the benefit of all. America is this bastion for freedom. It strongly pushes for people, for individuals to have a huge amount of freedom to be themselves, regardless of other religious ideologies around them, pressuring them to conform, or political ideologies pressuring them to conform. America is uniquely free in that regard, or at least it has been, and other countries have followed suit. These values are worth fighting for, aren't they? We've lost the narrative. Without a national story, we have grown complacent and adrift. We just don't know who we are. There's some data that basically backs us up. The CDC, before 2023, showed that 30% of adults report persistent loneliness. And UCLA recently reported that 40% of Gen Z feels disconnected. Depression. Depression is way up. More people are on depression meds than ever before in American history. We are losing ourselves. And this lack of sense of self leads to a very pliable mind that easily is drawn to conspiracy theories on either side of the aisle, anywhere they're coming from. It's like, oh, that's a good conspiracy theory. I'll just grab onto that. That feels good. It's people who have a strong sense of character and self, they don't do that. People who are feeling really good about who they are and feel this matrix of connection to their friends and family and their community are not easily swayed by some person spinning narratives online. And there are many reasons why Americans are not finding a healthy sense of self, nor a healthy sense of body. 40% of Americans are obese, 70% overweight. Now, you might want to adjust for those statistics based on body type and how those studies were done, but it's still really high, really high. And this is, from my personal experience, is about eating as a compensation, again, for a lack of esteem, a lack of self-esteem. There are many other reasons, but it creates a compounding problem where the mind is not as present as it can be to think clearly. People are not exercising. People are not in healthy places. We have teens and adults highly suicidal, highly depressed on medications. Let me just point out the obvious that human beings have not evolved for hundreds of thousands of years to be depressed and need medications to stay healthy and alive and not kill themselves. It's the environment. The environment is making us crazy. And a lot of it is this dang phone that just constantly distracts our attention from what? From connecting with other human beings. Because instead of the dopamine hit, which is basically constantly depleting your dopamine and just more and more addictive, you need more and more intense supply of that dopamine. Actual human interactions give you serotonin. When you see somebody in person, you touch their hand, give them a hug, look at their eyes, watch their smile, and feel the symbiotic sort of reaction of you feel the smile in your own face just watching them smile. All of those things have been cut out of our interactions. In the 90s, 50% of teens hung out daily with each other. By 2018, it's down to 15%, according to Jonathan Haidt's research. People who spend 5 hours or more a day on social media, which is a lot, they have 70% more suicidal thoughts than other people, according to the CDC in 2017. Text messages carry less than 7% of the data of face-to-face communication. This research was done, I think, by Morabian in the 70s, but it still holds up that 93% of meaning in communication is the tone and the body language. And very little. And then you can say, well, is that text even 7%? It's probably less. And so when we're texting each other and typing emails and having text on social media, like that is not real communication. That is not a conversation. It's not conscious. It's not an interaction that's actually going to do anything for us in a healthy way. I've heard a great expression that in-person conversations build relationships, phone calls maintain relationships, emails and text messages destroy relationships. And that's essentially what's going on here. The more time we spend online instead of in person, the more unhealthy, depressed, and polarized we become. We're a herd species, and technology is pulling us away from the herd. It's separating us from it. And we're in a health crisis physically. um, in which we're just depressed. And so our brains are are looking for new answers. They're looking for supplements, things that will help us feel alive in this moment, not fix the future. And so this entropy has been working to basically make the American public and many people in outside of America as well complacent, um, but anxious and angry and not able to come up with solutions, but definitely easy to point the finger, blame, and get angry and get rid of that politician, replace it with this other guy. We don't know what he's going to do, but hopefully it'll be better than the last person. And honestly, I just don't think that's good enough for us to make it as a species. And yet we have all this technology that could be used for our health instead. Money has been the unspoken religion sort of driving us to the lowest common denominator to profit instead of morally acceptable or good motivations. And this is really a problem that we're going to have to confront together as a people because it's not going away by itself. Ultimately, the solution to this, in my mind, is the conscious conversation, the conversation that brings a convergence of perspectives. And consciousness, as opposed to the reactive tribalistic mind, consciousness is calm presence, being aware of what the other person, not just what their words are that they're saying, but how they're saying it, their body language, their tone, maybe some subtle reflection of the energy of why they're saying it, the feeling around it, to just really be in a conscious state of absorption of what this person is giving you will help you understand that even if the words coming out seem like gobbledygook, you might understand what they're needing and what they're expressing in a deep, profound way that will bring you guys closer together rather than further apart. The conscious conversation, to me, is the only thing worth having because everything else seems to be just spiking us back into motivated reasoning circuits and rolling us over and over again in the mud. The conscious conversation is what is going to get us to understand each other, to rebuild the bridge we've been burning down, so that we can begin to go, oh, let's talk about that issue. Let's talk about abortion. Let's talk about the balance between socialism and meritocracy and the freedom of the individual. Let's talk about how institutions continue to suffer from entropy and get more and more inefficient over time, and how we can create corrective mechanisms to solve that. Let's talk about our involvement in foreign affairs. Let's talk about how we create fairness for the haves and the have-nots without creating just a leveling playing field that cuts off the most talented people from getting opportunities that are unique to their talents. Let's talk about how we make a better system with self-correcting mechanisms so that it doesn't just break down every generation. Let's start talking about the real ideas. Let's talk about the values we agree on before we start blasting the other person for being an idiot. Let's really have these dialogues. There's a great metaphor of the blind man and the elephant, where each blind man is feeling sides of this elephant, and one of them says, "Oh, it's a wall." One of them says, "Oh, it's a tree." One says, "Oh, it's feeling the tail." It's, "Oh, it's the rope." "Oh, it's a snake." They're feeling the trunk. All of them are completely wrong, but they all have a piece of the puzzle. And if they could share those pieces of the puzzle, might go, "Oh, I think it's an elephant." In fact, it is. We can prove it. This is what we need right now because, as many other scholars have said, we're in the time of Babel once again. The Tower of Babel has hit. We once could talk to each other and understand each other. Now we seem to be unable to communicate. And so we're going to need to use this conscious conversation to expand our intelligence and our ability to solve problems together as an extended mind, as a hive mind, and converge perspectives and solve these problems. So I'm going to have a lot of interesting guests on my podcast, starting with people I know and expanding to other experts as the podcast grows. One guest I'm going to have on a lot is my mother. Not because she is my mother, but because she is a brilliant thinker and a dynamic conversationalist. She's a professor of philosophy, comparative religion, and one of the world's foremost experts in Joseph Campbell and mythology. And she brings a lot of cross sectional um, angles to a conversation. And so I find her contributions terribly valuable, and she has made herself available to me. I think you'll enjoy her as well. We're not just going to talk about politics for the entire podcast. We will eventually span into other realms where we are holding the opposites, where we are converging perspectives on art, music, cultural things, which have always fascinated me, the difference between this culture and this culture, to help us understand, well, what's universal about the human condition and what is not. This experiment is going to expand, and I will really want you to be involved, sending me questions, suggestions for other interviews and topics. This is a community effort to literally heal the divide in America. It's time to just do it. I see a pathway to do it, and I'm going to take it. And I hope you'll join me.